Welcome to In the News for December 10th, 2021. I am Brett Burney from appsandlaw.com.
This is Jeff Richardson from iPhone JD. Hey, Brett.
Good morning, Jeff. Wow. Okay, so a fun week this past week. Several things that have been happening as we kind of start to get ready to close out this year, which is a little crazy for me to even say that. But one of the first things you linked to in your post today is I feel like there's going to be half of our audience that maybe cares a little bit about this, and the other half doesn't care at all.
Yeah.
But it is important. This is what I'm talking about is the Epic versus Apple. Right. This is where the Epic video games company brought suit against Apple, several months ago, claiming that Apple was being unfair. I mean, maybe you can give the actual technical legal language on there, but basically Epic wanted to sell some of their own in-store purchases on their own store as opposed to going through the App Store. It gets a little confusing here. Just basically, Epic was not happy. It was a whole big shindig, and it looked like that Apple was going to have to change some of their App Store approaches, Jeff. But then last minute, was this yesterday or 2 days ago, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, right, granted a stay in this motion. So basically, as you said at the very end of your paragraph, all you need to know that right now, nothing is changing.
Yeah, the lawsuit is interesting. You know, Epic definitely started this thing. I think, I guess you could take an opinion, with dirty hands. Epic makes hundreds of millions of dollars from in-app purchases on Fortnite. Goodness knows, when my kids were playing the game, they were buying costumes to make their characters look like bananas and to hold different things and stuff like that. So tons of money. But they didn't like the fact that Apple was getting 30% of it, and so they secretly put this thing in their program that they flipped a switch, and suddenly it was using Epic's own store, and you could bypass Apple's App Store in-app purchase system. And Apple's like, no, you can't secretly put stuff like that in the game. And then they immediately filed the lawsuit. It was all a setup. They knew what they were going to do.
Exactly.
The lawsuit occurred, and it went to the preliminary hearing happened, and the judge ruled in favor of Apple on just about all respects.
Right.
You know, Epic had to pay Apple millions of dollars, and, you know, they shot down the argument that Apple was a monopoly. The judge shot down the argument that Apple was violating federal antitrust laws. But there were some state laws, and, you know, there was one minor thing that Epic won on, but it had a big impact because the judge said that Apple was going to have to allow app developers to include a link to their own payment system. And at first people are like, oh, well, that means that Apple doesn't get its 30% at all. You could just completely use your own system. And then people realized over the last couple of months, well, that's not true, because what Apple could do is say, you can use your own payment system, but if you're not going to use ours and pay us 30%, you're going to have to use your own system and still pay us X, 20%. Who knows what X is? And so as a practical matter, it's not going to really change anything for the revenue that Apple gets, and it's not going to really change anything for consumers. But it would require Apple to fundamentally change how they handle in-app purchases. And so that's what Apple sought a stay while they contested that ruling, and the trial court denied the stay, but the federal appellate court granted it. And so now, Apple can make its case that portion of the ruling is incorrect. And if Apple wins, it never will have had to have changed its system. And again, what it really means for the consumer is that, we're not going to see some chaos in the App Store, because when the judge entered the order, she gave them 90 days to implement it, which would have run like next week or like very soon. So. Anyway, it's an interesting Apple. And again, it's tough to pick a side. You've got Apple, the most profitable company in the world, and Epic, got tons of money. So each side tries to claim that they are fighting for, the people. No, they both sides are just trying to make money. So it's
exactly. And like you said, this was a whole setup. This is the battle of the Tims, basically, right?
Yes.
Tim, I can't remember his last name, who is the CEO of Epic, has become very vocal in his distaste of how that Apple has run this. But can we just say quickly, and again, I'm not really necessarily taking sides here, but, when you sign up as a developer in the App Store, you are signing multiple agreements, right? Contracts, just like anything else. And one of them states, and it has been this way from the very beginning, I believe, or from the close to the very beginning, that when you sell an app on the App Store, basically Apple is handling all of the back end information, storing it, making sure it's secure, making sure that it is a good app and it does what it does. And because of all of that, they take 30% of any price that you pay. So the developer keeps 70% of that. And it's been a very nice symbiotic relationship, as it were, for many, many years. But I can see where there's a good argument on the other side that companies like Epic and others, especially even, to me, it's not so much Epic, but they're the big enough company to actually bring a suit like this, right? It's a lot of these small, tiny, one-man shop individual developers, Jeff, that you and I know that, they would probably be helped more if Apple didn't take that 30%. Although I've heard from some developers that they like it because Apple has that entire burden of basically allowing it to be distributed, right? They handle all the distribution costs. So anyway,
credit card
just
payment,
pros and cons.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's two issues here, Brett. I mean, one issue is, should Apple charge 30%? When they opened the App Store back in 2008, it was actually a bargain because at the time to buy software, you would have to walk to a physical store and get the box, and the local store would often be charged to take 40% of the cost to go to the Comp USA store. And so when Apple had the App Store and said, we're going to handle all of that stuff, and we're going to take 30%, developers were actually making more money. Now, over time, that's changed. You can make an argument that nowadays, maybe for some things, Apple should be charging 15%, and Apple is actually charging 15% for a whole different host of things, depending upon the size of your company and depending upon the nature of the purchases. So, but there's one argument of whether Apple should be charging more or less, and I'm sure Apple would always prefer to charge the most it can without being too much. But then there's a separate argument of, should you have separate in-app stores, because Epic just wants to, Epic's not saying, Apple's charging too much. They're like, we would just like to keep it all ourselves. Let's just, can I have all the cookies instead of you having all the cookies? And so that's sort of a separate issue. And for which the little developers don't really so anyway, it's an interesting, as always, the thing that's interesting to me about these lawsuits is that a lot of stuff becomes public that normally is private. So you mentioned the two Tims. There's emails from Tim Sweeney of Epic to Tim Cook from Apple, and there's a lot of things that normally would not see the light of the day that does because of the discovery process and lawsuits. So it's sort of, we talked about this last week too. It's interesting to sort of eat your popcorn and watch what's going on and be entertained by it. But at the end of the day, we'll see what happens to the lawsuits. Well,
last quick comment, just to bring it back to your ending sentence, like it doesn't change. The thing that really, where I think that's really impacts maybe the general user is the Kindle app. If you remember, when the Kindle app came out, Amazon didn't want to sell books through the Kindle app for the iPhone because every book Apple would basically keep 30%. I believe that's what it was, right? So today, still, you cannot buy a book through the Kindle app on the iPhone. Even though I use the Kindle app all the time, I just have to go somewhere else, Amazon.com on a computer, somewhere else, and buy the book first, and then it comes into my Kindle app. So to me, that was your point, is that Epic doesn't necessarily want to basically keep more money when they sell through an in-app purchase, but they may want to also have their separate store. Anyway, lots of weird things.
That's
going
a whole
in here,
other argument is when you have the app itself is sort of a store and it links to other things. And if you have, the Amazon app, you can use the Amazon app and Apple doesn't get 30% of that because you're doing physical things. But Apple says that if you're getting a digital good, there's many layers to this onion and it's very, very complicated. But for now, nothing's changing. And we'll see. That's the bottom line.
Let's go to hotel keys then.
Indeed.
This is great. I love this little story that you linked to here, because I believe we first heard about at WWDC, which was over June or July of this year. Apple was announcing that their Apple Wallet app was going to continue to expand. One of the main things I remember from there was the car keys, right? That a car key would be in your Apple Wallet. And then they were mentioning hotel keys and maybe additional keys, home, company, whatever. This is interesting that the Hyatt hotels, 6 Hyatt hotels so far at least, are now supporting the in-room key in the Apple Wallet. I found this interesting because I've actually been doing this for a while now, Jeff, through I'm a Hilton member and I use the Hilton app. So if I go to a room, they always still have to give me a physical card key, but it's almost like a backup. But I loved, as I'm walking up to my room out of the elevator, which I'm usually going to have my phone in my hand anyway, I will open the Hilton app and then I will say, unlock my room. It worked, but not very seamless. I would love to have this integrated within the Apple Wallet, and I'm just glad to see that we're starting to see some of this roll out, at least with Hyatt so far.
Yeah, my guess is that when Apple is controlling it, it's going to work more effectively, and it's built upon the
Right.
same technology that's used for Apple Pay, which works very, very well, and
Yes.
other things too. I mean,
Yes.
I know that there are people that have smart locks on their front door of their house that
Right.
through Bluetooth and stuff. And again, that doesn't use Apple Pay; that uses the Bluetooth technology you're talking about for the Hilton. But I actually love this idea of not having. I mean, the last thing I want to do is carry around keys, and a hotel
Yes.
key is nowadays is
Right.
better because it's a card, unlike the old days where it was a physical key. But still,
Right.
and especially if you have an Apple Watch, it's just so much easier to use. We'd actually looked at putting on the
Yeah.
front door of our house one of those digital locks, and the people that I've talked to that have those love them because it's so easy to walk in. Unfortunately, because my house is older and the doors sort of stick a little bit, it's not, we can't quite do it. We have the charm of the architecture of a house built in the 1850s, but it also means that we have to deal with its issues. But
Yes.
I love the idea of this, of and to be able to use the wallet app, especially on the Apple Watch. I mean, just yesterday I was getting some money from an ATM machine, and I just used my watch to instead of having to find my card and put it in and put my pin. I guess I still put the pin in, but it was, I like this
Yeah.
contactless system, and so I'd love to do it
Yes.
on hotels. I hope everybody has it. I feel like we're in the early days, but I really hope this works, and maybe the experience would be better than what you've seen with the Hilton app.
So if you have any holiday travel plans to the Walia Resort and Andaz Maui, I guess
Sounds
it's
good.
on Maui, right?
I wasn't
Or
going to go,
the-
but maybe now I should.
I know, or the Key West Resort and Spa, or I
sounds
guess
good, too.
like they got Dallas and Chicago. Yeah, that would be nice. Anyway, if you plan to, if your travel plans go to any of those Hyatt locations, that you'll be able to use the Apple Wallet app, which is great. Another story you linked to, which I was just engrossed in this morning, Jeff. It was fascinating. I didn't even know about this website, by the way. But, we've all watched the Apple Spaceship, otherwise known as Apple Park, right, come to fruition. I still remember when Steve Jobs, in his very last days, the last few months of his life, when he went before the Cupertino City Board or something along those lines, and he was talking about the plans before they started building it. But this was a great story that you linked to here with some fascinating pictures about the design teams inside Apple. Really, really cool stuff.
Yeah, even if you don't read this story, I encourage you to click on the link just to look at the pictures, because, people can argue about how practical, the advantages and disadvantages of Apple Park. Is it perhaps too much encouraging collaboration, and maybe people need their privacy of a private office?
Right.
But the pictures that show it's fascinating. Not only do you see the building itself, but you see people doing some of their work. I mean, how protective Apple is on pictures like this.
Yeah.
Every single picture had to be screened by, many levels of people. But it's really,
Exactly.
really interesting to see the types of stuff they show. And then, beyond the pictures, if you actually read the article, there's, all sorts of little details they describe.
Amazing.
On how it's just a few paragraphs in each one, but it's like design features, design thoughts that went into the camera app on the phone, that went into the font that Apple uses, all these things. It's a fun read.
Yeah, it's great. Like the fonts itself, and here's a great picture of that on like the topography. Unbelievable. Like they were talking about how there's 100,000 characters or something in the San Francisco font, and then it's like in a book, and so everybody in Apple, whoever's doing any design, is referencing this. Just incredible information on that. For nerds like us, just kind of getting an inside look, as it were, short of being able to actually travel to the Apple campus itself. The only thing I got to say quickly, I'm sure, like you said, these photos have to be staged, at least to some extent.
I'm sure.
Although I would like to think that they're not, because to me, it looks like, I just recently watched Blade Runner 2049 again, and they had the Tyrell Corporation, or it's the Wallace Corporation, I think, in that movie. I mean, where they actually create the replicants, and everything is just so clean, almost to the point where it's like, it's over clean, as it were, and creepy almost. And to these pictures, to me, just border just a little bit on that. Maybe it's because they're staged. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it just looks really cool. And again, where it's backed up by the text in it, like we're talking about with the topography information, the scalable fonts in there, and even some of these pictures, they're doing mock-ups of the cameras. There's a whole team that worries about the actual camera innards, as it were, right? But this team looks like they're worried about the way the cameras look on the outside,
right,
on the case, and that just continues to blow my mind. But it's
Apple
just
is
great, and
famous
they're all
for that.
smiley. They're all smiling and happy in these pictures, by the way.
Apple is famous for that attention to detail, and you get a little sneak peek into it happening here, even if it is sort of staged.
You know, one other thing in here, let me see if I can find it on this. What was it? They were talking about, when they were creating the AirPods. And didn't they say they have the largest library or database of ear, of ear, like they scanned, I can't remember. Oh, here it is. We molded and scanned ears, worked with nearby academics focusing on outer ears for the earbud design and inner ears for the acoustics. And the database is where the design starts. We've assembled one of the largest ear libraries anywhere. It's like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of scans of ears so they could get these AirPods to work correctly. That was fascinating, which in addition to that, I was thrilled to see your review this week.
Yeah, that's a good transition.
Of these, thank you. I was working hard on that. But this is good because I love my AirPods Pro, and I got to say, I'm just still using the silicone little buds that come with it. But just like you mentioned in your review, Jeff, I'm starting to see they just seem a little looser than they did, maybe 3 months ago or so. So it was great to see your review of the Comply foam earbud tips.
Yeah. Much like, Apple was just recognizing that article that there are thousands of different ear shapes. And so not every, EarPod is going to work for everybody, ear tip. For many folks, the Apple AirPod Pro tips are great. And, I'm sure that Apple, with all of its testing, decided that was, the least common denominator or greatest common factor, whichever one it is. But that doesn't mean that there are some people that it's not great for. And I feel like I've been one of these people. I love my AirPods Pro, and I can totally use the built-in tips, but they move around a little bit. And, I always feel like I wonder if there's something else out there. And so I've tried different things over the years. I've tried some Foam Master things. So, but this one are the Comply foam tips, which, I did in the review, and I've got them right here. It's just this little, memory foam that sticks on the end instead. Right. And they're nice because, they connect to the AirPod just like the Apple one does, but because they sort of
very satisfying click.
Yeah, they have the satisfying click, but you sort of squeeze them and then you put them in your ear and the foam expands. And I find them very comfortable. They're still not perfect. I still wonder if there's something better out there, but I do like them better than the Apple tips. In most ways. I don't like the fact that you have to take the time to squeeze them first and put them in your ears.
You mentioned
that's a little bit of a pain because it takes a few seconds for each ear. But the advantage is you get improved noise cancellation because not only do you have all of the digital noise cancellation, but this foam actually, literally prevents the sound waves from coming in even more. So, when you have these on, the outside world is really quiet. It can be a nice effect. Or if you want to listen to the outside world, you just put on transparency mode and that works too. So I really like them for that. So, if you find yourself, you love your AirPods Pro, but you feel like the tips could possibly be better. My message is there are alternatives out there. And whether you get something that's got silicone on the outside and foam on the inside, I used to have one of those, or something that's all memory foam, which is what I'm currently using, or whatever the next thing is, because who knows, I'm sure next year I'll be trying something else new. But there are alternatives out there. And I love that there are third parties that for relatively inexpensively, connect to the AirPods and can work. So.
Right. So I thought these sounded like, as I was reading your review, they sound like those foam earplugs that you can get, right? You squeeze them. Is that kind of, okay, that's the same thing as, but I also like your comment on there, and this is almost like a stop, a stop action for me, is that it takes time to put them in, because just like you mentioned in here, when I get a phone call, I don't want to pick the phone up. I literally want to grab my AirPods and throw them in my ear so that I can take the phone call on that. And I need it to be quick, right? You only got like 4 rings or whatever it is. But it sounds like you could get pretty quick about doing this, giving it a quick squeeze.
You can. You get used to it. It goes pretty fast. Yeah.
Yeah. Good review. So thank you for doing that. Another hardware item that you linked to, which just gave me a little bit of a blast from the past, is a new stylus from Adonit. And I looked this up because I remember the name Adonit from the early days of the iPad, right, Jeff? I think you may have had one of these styluses as well.
I've used so many. So I just found like one of the first ones was the Adonit ones that were like
there it is.
It has a little I forget the name of the Dot Pro.
That was so weird.
Do they still them? Yeah, they still sell them on the website.
I don't know. This is like
little, I'm holding it up to the camera for folks watching a video.
Yeah.
It looks like a little clear tip. And, it was back in the days when you needed to use something for an iPad that really simulated the tip of a finger. And Adonit, they did it. That I loved the Jot Pro. It was great. And then over the years, Apple made it so that not just Apple's own pencil, but third parties could actually use some of the same technology that the pencil used. And, there's many companies that make third-party styluses for the iPad, and Adonit I think is really one of the best. And I did a review, I think it was earlier in the pandemic, it may have been last year, of the Adonit. This one is, I think, the Adonit Note, and it's the Adonit Note UV, and it had the feature that it could actually have UV light coming out of it, so that you could actually like clean, disinfect things by having a UV light coming out of the end.
Oh, interesting.
See, it's got blue lights on it, but regardless of the gimmicks, the Adonit styluses, they always work really well. In fact, the most recent version of the Note worked in my mind just as good as an iPad,
really?
Pencil did in terms of the actual tip. Now, I like things about the Apple Pencil better, like the fact that it can attach to the top of the iPad, which is so much more convenient for that,
Right.
But so that brings us to today, where we've got this new one. This is called the it's not the Note, it's the
Adonit Dash.
The Adonit Dash
4, apparently.
Yeah.
This is the 4th iteration.
And the cool feature of this one is that you click a button on the back of the pencil, of the pen, as if it's a pen, and you switch between the mode that works with an iPad because it simulates the pencil, and a mode that simulates your finger and therefore can be used with an iPhone. So, I could see some people saying, I want to have one stylus that I can use with my iPad and my iPhone. And the author of this article notes that it doesn't work great on the iPhone. Like he says that if you're trying to like sketch notes, it's not perfect. It's the lines are going to be a little off. You're not going to be an architect designing the next house on your iPhone using the stylus. But for just tapping things on the screen and stuff like that, it certainly works fine, and it's got a clip on it. So, much like previously, we were talking a few minutes ago that you don't have to use Apple's tips for the AirPods Pro. There are third-party alternatives. You don't have to use the Apple Pencil. And though I ultimately find it's the best one for me, there are third-party styluses that work well, and the Adonit ones are great.
I'm so glad to hear you say that the functionality or the actual like writing from the Adonit is still good. As I have a fond corner of my heart for Adonit, just simply because I remember in those first years of the iPad before Apple came out with the Apple Pencil, that I think it was one of the best third-party stylus makers, completely agree. And they were doing great, and so we all had them because we wanted to do handwriting on the iPad, and Apple was refusing to release anything, and of course that has changed. And I got to tell you, once the Apple Pencil came out, I never looked at anything else. I just always felt like it was the better, superior experience on multiple levels. But I will tell you, the thing that caught my eye on this, and this is Ed Hardy's review, which is great, and Cult of Mac here, is not so much that I want to necessarily write on the iPhone, although there have been times when I would like to do that, like almost like writing on a Post-it note. But I am writing something on my iPad and I need to do something on my iPhone, and I have to put my stylus in the other hand and then, pick up my iPhone with my finger. I love the idea that Adonit as a third-party creator is coming up with something a little bit different that can be used and maybe in a little bit of a different way. So thanks for linking to that. Honestly, I haven't been following Adonit just simply because I was like, I'm all in on the Apple Pencil, but I'm glad to see that they are still making a lot of stuff on this.
It's funny, as a sort of a side note, there was a time years and years ago, the ages that you were talking about, where I was doing reviews of styluses on iPhone JD like once a month. I mean, I have a whole section of the archives where I've reviewed dozens of these things, and then it basically stopped. It stopped when Apple came out with the Apple Pencil. I reviewed a few more after that, and not many since. I actually have, if you click on index there, I actually have a whole section of stylus links right there.
There it is, number 6. That's right.
Nowadays, I very rarely review styluses because the Apple Pencil is so good. But it's nice to know that it's still an option out there if you want something different.
You have 32 reviews of styluses.
Some of those are updates of earlier reviews, like second and third generations. I can see that. Yeah, so
I did not even know. Do you still you must have all of these? Are you
giving them away? Someplace. Yeah, that's
look at that. The Wacom there, the 10-1. Oh, I remember the 10-1. That was one of the first ones as well. And of course, the Logitech Crayon that's been out for a while. Oh, that's so fun. And then look at all the Adonit. You have 7 Adonit reviews on here. That just shows from all the way back to Well, 2012 is the first one, right? That was the
Yeah.
Jot Pro. All right, that's fun. I'm glad we went down. You know what else is fun? The holidays with the fireplace.
Yes, indeed.
So this is another great story you linked to, and I think I had done this before, or this sounds like. Of course you can do this, but I'm glad that Zac Hall and 9 to 5 Mac linked to a specific app, a 99-cent app for your Apple TV that can turn your TV into a digital fireplace. We all need a little Christmas happiness here.
If you have a real fireplace, that's the best thing. But if you don't have a real fireplace, why not? Or have both. Why not have a digital fireplace? And, digital fireplaces are funny. There are stations around the country that for decades, during Christmas time, will just show a fireplace
exactly.
with Christmas music playing.
Right.
Which I've always thought is a little funny. But you know what? It's actually pretty, if you have your TV right there and your family is gathering around, opening up presents, why not have something on it? And in my mind, like if you've got an Apple TV, I think that there's two good things to do with the Apple TV. One is if you make like a folder of all of your holiday Christmas, all of your Christmas presents, or Christmas pictures, or all of your Hanukkah pictures, or whatever it is, and just have the Apple TV randomly display a slideshow of those pictures.
Right.
That's something fun to have in the background. So that's one good, nice way to use it. So it's in the background. Another good one though is to have a digital fireplace. Why not? Whether you use music or not. And so he links to one specific app and has some others. And I haven't actually tried these yet. In fact, now that I have a new 4K television, I want to see if there's any 4K
absolutely
HDR fireplace apps. If I find something good, I'll recommend it in the future.
You want fake fire to look the best that it can look, man. That is great. But just real quick, I mean, it is great we actually do this. Our TV is right there in the living room, and so on Christmas morning I turn the TV on with Christmas music, so now I can at least put something on. He talks about everybody loves the screensavers on Apple TV. They are incredible. They've always been, and they continue to be. But it's like Yosemite and New York City and different things like that. But having something a little bit different, you can have the fireplace going while you have your Christmas music in the background, and that's a lot of fun. Thanks for doing that and linking to that. And something else that's very fun, if it gets a little too hot with your digital fireplace and your iPhone is heated up a little bit, this last story here was absolutely fantastic. Razer, R-A-Z-E-R, is a company that I know of just because it makes some very high-end gaming accessories, mice, and keyboards, for example. It's very well known in the gaming community, but they're expanding a little bit, apparently. If you play games on your iPhone, you can now get a MagSafe fan to make sure that your phone stays cool enough.
What can I say?
Great.
Michael Simon of Macworld found this one and has a link to it, and it looks about as ridiculous as it can look. I mean, not only is it's huge honking fan, I'm not even sure how you hold your iPhone with this big fan in the back of it, but of course it's got colorful lights. I look at this thing and I laugh. Chroma. But you know what? My son, who loves playing games on the Mac we have at home, he doesn't use the regular Mac keyboard. A while ago, he had requested as a birthday present. He's got one of these big keyboards that not only does it have sort of the mechanical type keys,
right.
It's got like the colors on it. It's got rainbows and they're going back and forth and everything else. Rainbows. And I'm like, how do you concentrate on the game when you've got so many rainbow colors of lights coming out of the keyboard? I don't even understand it. And I guess that just shows the generation gap. So, for my son, he would probably look at this like I look at this thing and I just roll my eyes and made a joke about it getting the iPhone award for the most silly, whatever ridiculous accessory. My son would probably look at this and like, oh, this makes absolute perfect sense. I need this today.
Yeah, he needs it. Exactly. But yeah, I just got to say, we've talked about MagSafe right on the back of the iPhone 12 and the iPhone 13. And, it's mostly used for charging accessory, but we knew that third parties were going to be coming out with all kinds of additional things. And this is just another example, but boy, it's fun. Hey, Merry Christmas. It's going to be good. All right, let's go to some tips though, then in the know. So speaking of the newer iPhones that all run iOS 15, this is something else we heard about, I believe, in WWDC back in the summer, and we're starting to see some of this roll out now. This is some additional privacy settings that you can set within Safari to hide your IP address. So there's a couple of things that I wanted to mention in here. Some of it is still in beta, like they're not all fully baked in. And I anticipate in the next month or two, probably as Apple continue to roll out some updates to iOS 15, that we'll see some additional ones of these kind of built in. Many of us probably know about a VPN, a virtual private network, especially if you're in a company that requires you to use a VPN. That will basically encrypt your IP address many times, or hide your IP address, or basically put a different IP address than the one you're actually connecting from. It's a little confusing and techie, I understand, but this is additional protection. It can be an additional level of protection to make sure that people can't track you down, that kind of a thing. So Apple is now embedding some of this. Typically, a VPN you have to use on a third-party app, and there's some very good ones out there. TunnelBear is one that I use quite a bit. But now some of this is kind of built in. So this first one here is that if you go into if you're paying for an iCloud subscription, any of it, like 99 cents for I think you get a 200 gigs or something like that, or if you pay a little bit more, $3 a month, that kind of a thing. Or if you have Apple One subscription, if you're paying for any kind of an Apple subscription, you get this private relay for free, which is already built in. This basically, you can turn this on. This is a story from OSX Daily, which is talking about how you can do this in your iCloud settings. So basically, it would just kind of hide your IP address. So if you're paying for a subscription, you should have access to this today. If you're not paying for an iCloud service, you can still hide your IP address. You have to be upgraded to iOS 15. So let me see if I can pull this up. This is one that I found from iGeek's blog. This basically prohibits websites from tracking you or profiling you or understanding your geographic location, but it's not going to be quite as much as what you can get if you have a subscription to Apple. But the point is that it's better than nothing. Like if you're really concerned about this and you want to take advantage of the newer security features that Apple is baking into iOS 15, you can do this by going into settings. You go to Safari. You scroll down to privacy and security, and you can tap your hide IP address. And there's a couple of different options here, from trackers or from websites and trackers. If you do not subscribe to an iCloud service, you're only going to get from trackers. Better than nothing. But if you do have a subscription, you might have another option there that says from trackers and websites. So it's just a little bit more comprehensive on there. So I'll put all these links so you can follow along as to turn this on. But this is something that a lot of us, at least on the techie side, are excited about because Apple is continuing to bake some of these security features into iOS. But I think for the common person, many times I find, Jeff, that they don't really understand it all the way, or they just don't feel like it's that necessary. But I think certainly for a lot of professionals, business professionals, it's something that should be turned on since Apple is offering it.
Yeah, I'll say one word of caution. I mean, it's nice that you can get some enhanced privacy, and I always applaud Apple for doing what it can, because Lord knows every other company out there is trying to invade your privacy and sell your personal
Right.
information. I will tell you that the and it's still in beta, but the iCloud private relay function, I had it turned on for a while, and then I ultimately turned it off because I found that there were a few websites, and maybe this will be fixed as it goes through the beta process, that got so confused because your IP number is completely masked and it couldn't tell where, it literally could not tell where in the world you were coming from. The website would be a little like my local newspaper website would sometimes not load and other things like that. So I ultimately turned it off. And again, Apple, I'm sure, is aware that there were those issues and will presumably improve it over time, and it'll come out of beta, and maybe by the time it's fully baked, it'll work great. So if it worked great with no disadvantages on my web browsing, sure, I would turn it on. Because I've had some issues, I turned it off. So, just keep it. It's a beta process, just like
it is beta still right now.
But it's a nice idea.
But good point. Excellent. And you, sir.
So my tip of the week is this one. When I first saw this, I thought this is funny.
So
and then I'm like, well, this actually could be useful. So the project is called µBrowser for Apple Watch. Now, before I even talk about it, let me just pause. The name, µBrowser. It doesn't you cannot search for micro, M-I-C-R-O. You won't find it that way, because the way that the developer has spelled the name is he used the symbol for micro, which is the Greek letter mu. It's the lowercase version of mu.
Okay, that's what that is.
Sort of looks like a letter U. It looks like a lowercase u, except there's a line coming down the left side as if it was a P or something like that. So how in the world you type that on your keyboard is beyond me. So
maybe µBrowser.
If you're looking for this app, I recommend that you just go to the show notes for this episode or go to inthenewspodcast.com and you'll be able to click to go there. But once you get this thing downloaded, it's $1. It's 99 cents. It's cheap.
I'm doing it.
It is a web browser for your Apple Watch. And
Great.
Your Apple Watch screen is so small that when you're looking at the text and the pictures, it's so tiny. My thought was, why would anybody in the world want a web browser on an Apple Watch screen? That is just ridiculous. But I still paid the 99 cents because that was funny. But then after I started using it, I'm like, you know what? I can actually see use for this, because you might have a situation where, one of the ways in which my Apple Watch is most valuable are those rare situations I don't have my iPhone or my iPad or my computer near me. I'm out and about and I just have my Apple Watch. And if that happens, there may be times where you actually want to look something up on a website, maybe get some specific information, some specific website, some information, and normally you wouldn't be able to do it. But with this browser, you could either type using, the keyboard, or you can say the URL, which is not the easiest thing, or better yet, you can use the app on an iPhone to create bookmarks for this app. And so whatever that website is, if you're in a race and there's the race website and you just want to be able to, or if you're in the middle of a park and you might get lost and you want to have the park website, I could just, think about it beforehand. Is there a web page that I might need to be able to look at from my Apple Watch when I had nothing else? Just put a bookmark beforehand. And then you don't have to worry about typing the URL, although you could if you wanted to, and you could pull it up on your website and on your watch. And I will tell you, as tiny as it is, especially on the larger screen of the current Apple Watch that I have, that's just
the 7.
It totally works. You can see some of the pictures.
I'm so happy.
If you're watching the video version of this that Brett's showing, you can read websites. You can see the pictures. It absolutely works. So the number of times that you're going to want a web browser on your Apple Watch are going to be few, but I love that now you can do it. And maybe one day, just like in the early stages, it was only third parties that provided GPS map apps for the iPhone. And now, of course, Apple has the Maps app and it has it for a long time. Maybe one day Apple will have a version of Safari for the Apple Watch. And if so, then this app will be Sherlocked, as they say. This app will not be necessary. But for the time being, spend $1, get it. You never know if you might want to use it. It's an interesting thing. It's an interesting party trick, and maybe it'll be useful one day. So, bravo to the developer. His name is Arno Appenzeller. He's a German developer, and I love that he came up with microbrowser. I'll say one more thing: that crazy little moo symbol that he uses in the title. One advantage of it is that Apple sorts it at the end of the alphabet. Now, why does that matter? Because when you know how you tap the button on your Apple Watch, if you have the honeycomb, you won't see this, but if you have the feature turned on that you see all of your apps in a list, because it's at the end of the alphabet, you can just scroll all the way to the bottom of the list.
Oh, yeah.
And it's the last one. So it's easy to find the app because it's going to be last. It's going to be behind Z or whatever. So that's a one little, advantage of using great. The micro. The Greek
That's
letter.
funny. That's a neat tip, by the way. Just it's a bonus tip.
Yeah.
I've always used the honeycomb. I love the honeycomb.
I know. You like the honeycomb. I prefer the list.
I do, because that's the way it's. I just like that you can like zoom around. But Jeff, sometimes it's crazy to be able to find something that I want. I'm like looking around, scrolling around, and anyway, just turning that into a list. I knew you could do that, but that's a great little tip, a bonus tip.
Yeah. So anyway, we've been learning lots about the Greek alphabet as we go through the different stages of COVID and what is Omicron, what is Delta.
Yeah, no kidding.
Today we're talking about Moo.
Now we got Arno. Can I just say quickly, I've always thought that was an oversight on the Apple Watch. I hear you. I feel you. Most people would be like, that's ridiculous. Why would you want to surf the web on your watch? I'm not going to be surfing the web on my watch. However, if I get an email where it has a link, or if I wanted just to look something up in my phones, maybe in my briefcase or something, I'm sitting there, and I don't want to get it out. There could be times I just want to do a quick search on something. And again, it's not all that frequent, but I have just wanted to be able to go and see on my watch, or like a news story or something that pops up, on a notification on my watch. I want to be able to go and look at that just quickly. I don't want to read all in depth. I just want to see a little bit of the first paragraph or something. Anyway, you can tell I'm thrilled about this. Yeah, this is great. Thank you, Arno.
This µBrowser app has a DuckDuckGo as a search engine.
I saw that here.
So like you literally, even if you didn't know what website you wanted to go to, you can open up the app and you can do a search in DuckDuckGo, which is a competitor to Google with lots of privacy features. And you just needed to find something. You could do a search and find the website in DuckDuckGo and then click on the link and go to that website. So even if you don't know the URL or you don't want to type it, but you just want to like write the name of the website, that works too.
Yeah, this is great. And thank you, Arno, Mr. Appenzeller, what a wonderful name, for doing this. I mean, and he's linking to this. I just pulled this Bloomberg story up where people are talking about it's time for the Apple Watch to be completely free from the iPhone. I don't know if I'm completely agree with that, but I would love it. The more and more that the Apple Watch can stand on its own is great. It already has cellular capability in those models, etc. So anyway, Jeff, what a great pick. Thanks for bringing my attention to that. We'll link to that, and I'm going to go buy my own copy of the µBrowser, micro browser, a basic browser. Fantastic, my friend. Always great to talk with you. Thanks, Jeff. And we will talk next week before Christmas. See you next week.
Thanks, Brett. Bye-bye, everybody.